officials in 2 Latin American countries alerted the WHO of several outbreaks of a new infectious disease that's mysteriously appearing across the region, Severe Epidemic Enterovirus Respiratory Syndrome 2025. Over the past 6 weeks alone, there have been 500 confirmed or suspected cases reported. The virus could cause a severe pandemic if early containment and mitigation efforts are not successful.
The pandemic in this type of situation and trend would be a risk for the global health security.
Pandemics are inherently political, financial, and so much broader.
We have not spoken on the leadership in country, and I think that we need to be also very careful. We cannot decide a lot of things without the leaders be involved and agree on that.
There is no substitute for national leadership.
It's important to support the local response or the national response.
Training those that are in these areas first, enabling them with the tools, protecting them, and if needs be, regional solidarity first.
At this stage, communication is key, and communication should include not just scientists with data, but also social, religious, and political leaders.
Trust. This is an essential issue, and trust was broken among countries, between populations and healthcare systems, between healthcare systems and governments.
I'm very sorry to say that in 2025, we need to strengthen the health system.
WHO needs to be a voice for the voiceless.
No one is safe until all of us are safe.
As of today, there have been an estimated 1 billion cases worldwide, with more than 20 million deaths, including nearly 15 million children. Countless millions are alive, but left with paralysis or brain damage. The most successful countries are those which invested in preparedness and trained for this moment years in advance. This included having full-time pandemic preparedness and response teams, which conducted detailed operational planning and routinely tested those plans through exercises and drills. If more countries had participated and heeded the guidance, the toll might have been much less.
A condition that we will not call autism. I don't like the word autism. He was vaccine damaged. He was neurologically damaged. A condition that we will not call autism. I don't like the word autism. He was vaccine damaged. He was neurologically damaged. A condition that we will not call autism. I don't like the word autism. He was vaccine damaged. He was neurologically damaged. A condition that we will not call autism. I don't like the word autism. He was vaccine damaged.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the show. This is Gigaohm Biological, a high-resistance, low-noise information brief brought to you by a biologist, coming to you live out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It is the 8th of May, 2025, and I'm happy to be here. I think it's important to realize that for a long, long time, I thought that there were good people around, and all I had to do was teach them the truth, and the truth would escape. And together we would change the world. But instead, I kept running into people who were, had ulterior motives. And that's what I meant in the beginning of this stream. That's why I started with this graphic in the beginning of the stream, because we need to understand the form that this military-industrial operation took. And it is a form that is a lot different than what you see in a comic book or on a movie screen. There are coordinated liars. That's all it requires. And these actors were put in place because there's trillions of dollars at stake and because there's 2 generations of human endeavor at stake here, all bent on the Human Genome Project. And so once you understand that COVID is just a part of that, once you understand that from the moment that we dropped the bomb, basically, this whole thing started, and it is a contiguous line of people that were connected to all of those pillars of the military-industrial complex around the Manhattan Project and after World War II that are now the same people. They're all descended from the same dads. And it is remarkable because part of this illusion is a number of fake groups, of sabotaged groups that herd cats for this illusion and maintain this limited spectrum of debate, which results in an illusion of consensus, which, like it or not, can even affect the people at the highest levels of our society. Social media can be used to convince a president just like it can be used to convince your grandmother. Ladies and gentlemen, whoever surrenders to the scrolling, whoever surrenders to the social media as being a representation of social reality is essentially a victim of it. And that's where we are. That's why I think it's so important to say that they need us to teach our children this gain of function mythology. And by simply not acquiescing to that pressure, we can actually win. And if you understand specifically how this was done over the last 5 years, how it's possible that we got to the point where everybody, both sides of the coin, have come to consider a lab leak a possibility, even if it doesn't explain the last 5 years, it could explain the future 5, depending on where avian flu came from. And so we must be vigilant. We can't let any of this dust in our eyes. And we've got to get to the eyewash station of biology. And I hope that's Gigaohm Biological. The voice you hear is that of JJCouey. You can find my work on the PubMed website using my last name, my first 2 initials. You can also find a lot of my ideas contorted and diluted on the Substack called Woodhouse 76, where those ideas are used to have fake dialogues with people like Claire Craig or Pierre Corey or even Mike Eden and hopefully Jay Bhattacharya. That would make this comedy routine complete. Anyway, I also helped Robert F. Kennedy Jr. write this book, and we had a great relationship. And then Children's Health Defense hired me after that, and I thought that was a great thing, but it turns out it wasn't. They fired me for talking about Robert Malone at the end of 2024. And so yesterday I covered this, hold on one second. Yesterday I covered this video, which is of these 3 clowns, 2 of which are now at the top of the pyramid of the FDA. This guy is at the top of the pyramid of the FDA, an Egyptian, and then that guy is at the head of the vaccines. He's replacing Jeremy Marks or Marks, whatever that guy's name was. Was it Jeremy Marks? Can somebody put it in the chat? But anyway, whoever Marks, the guy was at the FDA that made all those goofy videos about kids getting vaccines is fine. That guy's being replaced by him. So I can't stress enough how this is absolutely contiguous with this diagram. Most of these people were put in place specifically so that these people, these actors that we covered yesterday, could be put in place to maintain the trajectory that we are on, where the medical data of America and the medical remnants of America, all the things that are coming out of our hospitals, all the things that are coming out of all these testings, all the data that's coming off of our phones is now given up to the highest bidder. And the highest bidder right now might actually be the national security state in America that for a long time has made this a priority under the pretense that it is should be the basis for a biological security defense system for America. We have to first understand the human genome. And of course, that argument was specifically made to the Clinton administration, for example. And so a spectacular commitment to lies has been maintained, and it's been maintained, for example, by Tony Fauci being in his position for so long. It has been maintained by the people that Fauci trained under the HIV pretense have maintained their positions for so long, because it is a spectacular commitment to those lies that allows those people to function at that high level in that bureaucracy. Whether or not they're read in is still hard for me to tell, to be quite honest, because, again, remember, for nearly 50, well, I guess if you count my toddler age, then for 50 years of my life, I was spellbound under the same pretense that viruses exist and contagion can be understood as viruses moving from person to person, and never gave it much thought. Just like most people in academia don't really give it much thought. It's only after 5 years of giving it much thought and trying to help people who I thought were giving it much thought for longer than me, did I realize the extent to which we have been lied to, brought here over generations. It's not our fault, but we can save our children from this. And so these people have been put in place on social media to create an illusion of consensus, to agree about what questions to ask and what the right answers are, and to laugh about it so that you feel comfortable with their conclusions. And the underlying presuppositions of all the discussions that they have are the actual enchantment. If these guys don't question PCR and they don't question its ability to find and identify novel pathogens easily, then that mythology will be maintained by the entire 2 hours conversation. If they don't talk about the fact that the population pyramid had an anticipated rise in old people and an all-cause mortality that could have been misconstrued as something else, having a propensity to kill old people like this bald guy wants you to believe, then that illusion will be maintained by the 2 hour conversation that doesn't even actually directly address it. And just like Wikipedia, it's not so much what's there, it's what's not there, what's assumed, what they allow you to assume. And how long did they argue about boosters, for what age group? And now they're part of the FDA. And this is all by design, because the health freedom movement in America was never real to begin with. I thought it was, just like everybody else did, but it wasn't. It was already there. Meryl Nass was already there. Don't you see? Stephanie Seneff was already there. And because of the way that the pandemic went and the nature of the, how on narrative did we stay? We didn't stay that on narrative. Everybody didn't take the shot. And so this fracturing of society, I can only see as being on purpose. And this putting of these people into places right now like Vinay or like the latest thing with Casey Means, this can only be to light the fuse of America's controlled demolition. That's all I can see here. This is undermining the very fabric of our society by putting clowns in places where there should not be clowns. People shouldn't walk into the U.S. government and meet a bunch of people in funny animal costumes. But that's essentially what we have here. At least with Barack Obama, they tried to portray him and made him get a resume that seemed like could be misconstrued as somebody who knew what community service was. That's what they tried to do with Bobby. But all these other people, come on. It's like entrepreneur, 5-time postdoc and surfer going nowhere. What, Deep Woods doctor, bioweapons expert? What are we talking about here? These aren't patriots. And these people haven't made any progress in 5 years. Except for in their tuning and their harmonizing. These people sing together better than the nylons do. And that's why nobody ever talks about Brandy Vaughan or the biology of ingestion versus injection, which I think is one of the most beautiful simplifications that Brandy contributed to my lexicon. That's why Polly Tommy is in the same place that she's been for so long. And why nobody really points that out. Like, wow, you've been fighting for a long time. I mean, could you summarize the message for us? Mary Holland, you sure have been fighting for a long time. What's your elevator pitch? Their elevator pitch is what? It's health freedom. We should be able to say whatever we want to. We should have free choice. Everybody should have free choice. It's worth 6 million votes, ladies and gentlemen. People like Steve Bannon know that. People like Peter Thiel know that. People like Alex Karp know that. You know, the guy who went to Germany and studied for a while because he wanted to understand how people know things and how people perceive participation in their democracy. And so they created a social movement and they curated it so that it would go nowhere, but it would hurt as many cats as possible. 5G, here we are. There's a booth over there. And Brandy eventually figured it out. Brandy eventually figured it out after she made all these videos with all of her heroes, and every time she says hero, they cringe. Just like Polly did in the last video. Now she's cringing as she says, I'm here with my hero. Suzanne Humphreys knows that she's not a hero. She knows that she's a liar. She's definitely on script. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind that this is the reality of America. And that means that as Americans, we have to wake up, take responsibility for where we are, apologize to our children, and clean up this mess. This mess is a continuous line of mess, right? And we need to take responsibility for that. That doesn't mean we have to burn the flag. It doesn't mean we have to separate into 50 states, although maybe that's not the worst idea ever. But maybe we should give everybody some financing and some free help to move to whatever state they want to move to, so that then when we declare the borders closed, everybody's happy with where they are. But I can tell you for sure that a group like the Independent Medical Alliance, who's promoting, people like Andrew Wakefield, is just part of that show. It's part of that illusion of consensus that there is some movement, and some alliance of groups, and it's just nonsense. It's absolutely, positively only hurting cats. The idea that Dr. Casey Means is now the new Surgeon General nominee. What could possibly go wrong here? Well, there could be a hearing with a lot of contentious questions. There could be all kinds of show there, right? We could talk about her dad and the connections her dad has. Or we could talk about her maybe being in CIA. And so, again, this is going to happen around the world. It's going to be a sort of predictable wave of media hype. And of course, all of these people that are on the MAHA movement are triggered by it, because some of them do know that she's kind of a Johnny-come-lately. She didn't fight against COVID. She was writing her book during COVID, and now she gets to come in front. That's not fair. And so, of course, this is all built into the movement. This is all drama. Now we're still arguing and listening to the same people argue, even if a few of them are just unwittingly doing what they're kind of set up to do, because they don't need them anymore. If Mary Talley Bowden gets really upset with Kelly Victory because Robert F. Kennedy Jr. apparently doesn't have any power at all, well, that's really just blaming Donald Trump then, isn't it? And so now they can start this narrative that Donald Trump's not listening to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. doesn't have any power. And meanwhile, on PBS NewsHour and all over the left, they're still talking about this guy being a clown and Casey Means being evidence that obviously this clown has got another clown in there. And so we'll be arguing with our own side, supporting people on our own side, and they're all on that same diagram. We are trapped in a hamster wheel. And the rungs of the hamster wheel are the social media accounts of these people. The questions that they say we should argue about. The people that they say we should ally ourselves with or ally ourselves against. And all the while, all of these people believe essentially in the bad biology, that it's a combination of your environment and your genes. So if we understand the environment and we can understand your genes, basically we just have to put those two together with AI, and then we can take over the evolution of the species. I know usually you're used to me not starting with an introduction like that, but today I thought I'd mix it up a little bit. Welcome to the show. This is Gigaohm Biological, a high-resistance, low-noise information brief where we seek the truth together. Biology is the way. I thought I'd go back in time today because it is Thursday, right? It is Thursday. And sometimes I do a throwback Thursday, and I didn't title it that, but that's what I'm going to do today. I want to see if you can see how this is a fake MAHA movement by going back to 2017 and watching a video that happened of an event that happened in April of 2017. And again, remember, this is in the context of these, this previously under control pneumonia, and then suddenly in 2020 we lose control of pneumonia and a bunch of people die. But you can also see the slant in the curve here. We have an expected rise in all-cause mortality. We have an excess number of old people that we could have made even worse, right, by just making sure that in all these years in prep for the big show that we took really good care of old people. We're going to spare no expense on all the old people for like 4 years. And then in 2020 we're just going to say, you know what? Antibiotics don't really work for pneumonia, and dexamethasone, that's great stuff. That makes everybody feel better for a while. And supplementary oxygen's better than nothing. So 2017, they have already had Vaxxed 1. ICANN already exists. And now we're about to put Mary Holland and James Lyons Weiler and a few other people in place so that we can convince Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to change his Mercury project to Children's Health Defense and believe that, we need to fight against vaccines too, because there's mercury in those as well. That's essentially how they got him. He might not know how awful this rig is, how awful this Truman Show is, but he's got so many people around him telling him he's doing a great job. He might not realize that already back in 2017, these people were building their resume as people speaking out about this, including Mary Holland, who in 2015 was on Democracy Now! Saying that the untested MMR or some component of it is responsible for her son's autism. Remember in 2013, her chief science officer at CHD would not use the word autism, as I showed you in the beginning of my presentation today, because it's not autism, it's vaccine damage, it's neurological damage. Let's check this video out. You're going to love this. It's an IPAC video from 2017. Shoot, I need more water.
So this is Chaz DeBolt. She's with the Washington State Department of Health. And
you're just going to have to watch it like this and tolerate it.
And I'm here as a private citizen.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
There's James Lyons Weiler. There's Mary Holland. There's Sasha Latipova 1.0.
Do you have any thoughts on homeoprophylaxis? And that's one question. And then I have a second question for like the attorney types. I received a form when I took my child to preschool, and it said, I know I could be causing the death of my child
Mary
and
Holland
the
there.
other children. And I refused to sign it, and I had to leave. And I'm wondering, is there anything I could do to fight that?
I can't afford
to
listen
hire
to
an
that
attorney,
again.
but I want to
gotta listen to that
it.
again. Sorry,
That's
I'm
private preschool.
Citizen.
So this is in New York. They're asking questions. They're asking questions. Sorry. They're asking questions to the. Thank you, buddy. They're asking questions to the panel after the panel has presented over 2 days. And so you can find some of those panels. This is called Immunology Session 6, and there's Session 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1.
Do you have any thoughts on homeoprophylaxis? And that's one question. And then I have a second question for like the attorney types. I received a form when I took my child to preschool, and it said, I know I could be causing the death of my child and the other children. And I refused to sign it, and I had to leave. And I'm wondering, is there anything I could do to fight that? I can't afford to hire an attorney, but I want to fight
What
it.
did she say? I didn't get that again.
Private,
Why?
Private preschool, right? We don't have public.
Any thoughts on homeoprophylaxis? And that's one question. And then I have a second question for like the attorney types. I received a form when I took my child to preschool, and it said, I know I could be causing the death of my child and the other children. And I refused to sign it, and I had to leave.
Oh,
and I'm wondering,
okay,
is
I
there
got it.
anything I could do to fight that? I can't afford to hire an attorney, but I want to fight it.
So now there's a letter that she got that said that if you're not going to vaccinate your kid, then you have to sign a letter that says you could be contributing to the death of other children. Or your own child. That's pretty hardcore.
That's a private preschool, right? We don't have public preschools here, so it's a private institution.
Was the first part of your question directed at an individual?
Oh.
I can address say a little. I'm not a doctor, but
Just plays one on TV.
I work for a holistic veterinary practice, and we do use a lot of homeopathy in treatment. We get questions about no-sodes for dogs all the time. Our vets do not recommend them because the basis of homeopathy is treating disease with these homeopathic medicines. They're not really intended as a prophylactic or a preventive measure. Now, I have heard of naturopaths that use those preparations kind of to fudge titers so that kids can get into school. There's really not a lot of info on if they actually prevent disease, if they work the same way that a vaccine would. They can produce antibodies, and you could have a positive titer, which schools do accept as a substitute. But really, they don't work the same way, and that's not really the basis of homeopathy. So that's the best answer I can give you on that. They could help. We don't really know. I don't think there's been enough study on it.
Can I add to that? So the problem is that homeopaths do not have enough funding and possibilities to actually do any studies about homeoprophylaxis the way it would be designed for vaccine, to test for efficacy and so on and so forth. So that's why we are stuck in this situation where we can't predict ahead of time whether it's working or not. We know that homeopathy works for historical reasons, and those who have personal experiences with homeopathic remedies know, just like people know when there is vaccine injury, people who use homeopathy successfully, they see the difference.
You don't like it that way? I'll put it in the front. Let me just format it different. Did that not work? I guess that didn't work. To start it over. I just like to have that slide in the front there because it's really important.
On it.
Can I add to that? So the problem is that homeopaths do not have enough funding and possibilities to actually do any studies about homeoprophylaxis the way it would be designed for vaccine, to test for efficacy and so on and so forth. So that's why we are stuck in this situation.
There we go. Okay, I have to start it over again. Sorry, but you said it. I'm just responding to the chat. Current slide. I'll just do it again and go forward because I think I was pretty good at it.
Do not have enough funding and possibilities to actually do any studies about homeoprophylaxis, the way it would be designed for vaccine to test for efficacy and so on and so forth. So that's why we are stuck in this situation where we can't predict ahead of time whether it's working or not. We know that homeopathy works for historical reasons, and those who have experience, personal experiences with homeopathic remedies know, just like people know when there is vaccine injury, people who use homeopathy successfully, they see the difference in the recovery of, speed from various diseases. So it's really an unknown, so you can't say one way or another. Historically, homeoprophylaxis wasn't used as vaccines for long-term prevention. It was only used in the context of the ongoing outbreak. And there are some studies on leptospirosis in Cuba where they did look at it from a public health perspective. They didn't do homeoprophylaxis versus placebo.
So in case you don't see what I see is a person with a foreign accent. You can find out later what her name is, and you'll find out where she worked and where her training was, and it won't surprise you at all. What I see is somebody who's acknowledging viruses, acknowledging that vaccines probably work, but homeopathy might be an alternative to it, but it's not appropriate as prophylaxis. It's only appropriate when things are spreading. And so with this in-depth knowledge that she will present in immunology session number 5, where she talks about all kinds of stuff, all the biology and virology and molecular biology you could possibly want, never once does she question the idea of intramuscular injection as medicine. Never once does she question the idea of RNA, how can it do that? Never once does she question the idea of vaccination in general, just offers alternatives, offers explanations for why it might not always work as well as we thought, and even wrote a book about it. I don't know if she's a good guy or a bad guy, but my feeling is that she's not contributing to simplifying the problem, and all the work that I've found from her doesn't simplify the problem. This question is not simplifying the problem.
It wasn't a study. It was just handing out homeoprophylaxis to leptospirosis, affected area, which brought down the epidemic, which would normally happen after rainy season. So there is a possibility that it works, so it needs to be investigated, but we cannot really apply it right now the way vaccines are intended to.
I'm going to give you half an answer to your second question, and then let's talk offline. When a law is unjust, it must be broken. So if you look at any social movement in history, from 19th century slavery to civil rights, the people who were seeing ahead into the future did not go along with the law. And if you want to know what I mean, we'll talk after.
I can add a slight bit of info on that topic too before.
Let Alan have a turn first.
Yeah, I'm going to respectfully disagree with that. We're a system of laws, and if we decide we're just going to it's not arbitrary, obviously be a good reason. But if we don't follow the laws, if we decide we're not going to follow this law, well then what laws are we going to follow?
That is not Sasha Latipova. Do not get confused, okay? That's not Sasha Latipova. I can tell you who it is right now. I got to look over here, though, because I don't know her name off the top of my head. It is Tatiana Obukanich. Tatiana Obukanich, PhD, Physicians for Informed Consent, Founding Director Emeritus. She has her PhD in immunology from Rockefeller University, or did her postdoctoral training at Harvard Medical School and at Stanford School of Medicine. And during her postdoc and doctoral studies, she co-authored several peer research reviewed things in Nature, Cell, and later authored the book titled Vaccine Illusion. So that's who that is. And I'll let this keep playing.
Slippery slope once you start down that path. Now, I would be the first to say there are extreme situations where you don't follow a law for the sake of following a law. If there's going to be some obvious negative effect, then you make a decision, and there's no quick one-size-fits-all kind of thing here. But what I will say, that situation in particular, when the government requires you to agree with them, they're actually violating First Amendment free speech. Free speech, interestingly enough, includes not only the right to voice your own views, within reasonable limits. You're no longer allowed to put the prescription for how to make a dirty nuclear bomb on the internet, but within reasonable limits, you have the right to share your views, but you also have the right to be free from being
I'm sure Mark heard that.
To speak. When someone says you have to agree, when the government says you have to agree with me, you're being compelled to speak or required to speak. That's a violation of First Amendment free speech. So there's a clear legal violation there that could potentially be pursued. There was a group of parents in a new...
So do you find it surprising at all that he's making an elaborate show of how free speech is at the heart of this?
Stop lying! Stop lying!
It's brutal.
New England state who pursued that and actually got the health department to change the form there without having to file a lawsuit. But potentially you could file a lawsuit as well.
Alan, in this particular case, we're talking about a private institution, not a public school. Does that change anything? Is that access or... Sorry?
Yeah,
I stand corrected. So
well,
is there a difference,
it does come up with private physicians with the vaccine refusal form, and while I would say it's clearly unethical, there's a separate question because we have constitutional rights with governments, not with private entities, but there are exceptions, and there's sometimes where when you're dealing with the vaccines, which is so deeply entrenched in government, to make a long story short, that would create an exception, but it's you have to look at the specific situation as to
Leah, did you have something, Leah? I kind of cut you off.
Something on the note of what's on the exemption form. There is a bill that would remove those incriminating pieces of the form.
I'm going to say something crazy here. I think that there is a case that happened in Idaho where a mandatory vaccine was thrown out because the rationale for vaccination was dumb. Either it didn't work or people were getting, I don't remember what it was. But there is precedence in American law. And somebody from the health freedom movement is thinking about running for governor of Idaho. But, whatever. I'm just throwing that out there for, somebody that really wants to chase down something. That might be something to chase down.
It got introduced right before the deadline for this session, so it didn't go anywhere. It's still a possibility for the next session. So
is that not moving for you
HB
either?
2092,
Sorry about that. Let me see
talk to your
where
House
we are. I'll just escape here for a second and start it again. That sometimes goofs up when I play big videos like this. I apologize. And it's like right here, we're 8 minutes or so.
Form and then signing it, handing it.
Oh, no.
Potentially you could file a lawsuit as well.
Alan, in this particular case, we're talking about a private institution, not a public school.
It's still a possibility for the next session. So it's HB 2092. Please talk to your House representatives about it and why it's important to you, because they need our personal stories in order to even consider doing that. So.
Can I go one step further with that, or do we need to move on? I'll let you make the call on it.
Did you have something to add on it, Jack?
Yes, thank you. In a number of states, people are modifying the form and then signing it, handing it back, as Mary said earlier. I don't know if you were here present or not, but the solution for you tomorrow that's easy to recommend is that form of your expression is still your expression, as Alan is teaching us. And so if there's something on there that you disagree with, just cross it off, right? Initial the cross off and then sign it and then hand it back. That puts them in the position where they're going to have to be the instant.
So he's totally an expert on legal documents now. You can just take a contract and cross it out and initial it and then sign it, and that's totally the way it works while he's sitting on a panel with a lawyer from Columbia University right next to him. That's pretty remarkable.
Either in a court of law. If they push it back to you and say, well, I'm not going to accept this, then if you want to sue them, then you can say they refused the form and then still have the same discussion.
Go ahead, Alan.
If you modify the form, they're going to say we can't accept it. They're going to send it back. I mean,
how is it possible that that's the guy who says that when he's sitting next to a Columbia lawyer right there? and somebody from the New York Health Department right there. What is going on?
They have the leverage. I'm going to respectfully disagree. And so they say, you sign the form or you can't come to school here, and they're the one in the position to say that. Or you can't, I will not treat your child in my practice if you don't sign the form, in the respective situations. I would not want to sign something that I didn't agree with, but so far, now this might be a naive thing to say, but so far I've never heard of anybody, a situation where somebody had one of those forms where somebody tried to use it against them. You said you were a bad parent, therefore, this consequence. I think it's there for the simple purpose of trying to coerce you into vaccinating right now, and if you really dig in your heels and you say, I'm not going to do this, then okay, your kid doesn't go to school here or you don't get to come to this practice, so you're left holding the bag. You can try modifying it, and if they accept it, great. I say do it in the smallest way possible, right above your signature right. I do not agree with all of the above. The least way that you can write it, I think, has the best chance of them accepting it. But if they say no, you keep that one as the evidence that you tried to disagree. You sign another one the way they want it and get on with your life. Now, you can also challenge it legally if it's a public school with a form because it's unconstitutional, in my opinion. You find an attorney and you could potentially get the health department to change the form again, potentially without a lawsuit at all.
There's an attorney right there, but she apparently doesn't have an opinion.
I work with hundreds and hundreds of people over the years, and I rarely have somebody who has the emotional stamina, the money, and says, yeah, let's go to court. I want to, fight this. We all want to fight it, but who actually wants to hire an attorney and walk through the steps? So.
I'd like to inject that you're part of a community as well, and there is resources online for you to do GoFundMes. And I've seen people be intimidated by lawyers, nothing against lawyers, but their own lawyer. Their own lawyer who said, you're going to offend the judge if you go to the community with this to raise money. And I said, go to the community and raise money. I know examples of where a doctor systematically has a conversation with the patients and they say, just cross out what you don't like and sign it. I'll accept it. So it can work. It depends on the practice. And if the most valuable thing that you might have in this situation are your feet, and go find another practice.
Okay, let's move on. Oh, we have one more comment. Can I have a comment from one of our
people? Me. Right. Okay, so yeah, because I know you're not from Washington State, Alan. So many of us do homeschooling, and as you know, the people who work at the schools will ask you to do more than what you are legally required to do by the state law. Now, so what we do is we get educated as homeschoolers. For example, we go to the school, we say, here, I'm going to give you the information you need. They give you a form asking for 5 other pieces of information. And if you say to the person who works there and they're ignorant enough, no, I only need to tell you these 2 things, they might argue with you. But if you then get the support of WHO and you get the legislation, you come back and say, legally, I'm only obligated to do this, they will give in. Now, I'm pretty certain that this form that's being floated around the schools that comes from Department of Health, I think it is actually an expansion beyond what the law actually states we're required to do, and that the Department of Health pushed it a little bit, and they're just waiting for people to be ignorant enough to give them what they want. So what I would do is check with Department of Health, confirm whether their form lines up with the actual letter of the law. I don't think it does. And if you can do that and go back to the school, they've lost their argument. But someone has to do that check on whether this new form lines up with what the actual letter of the law is. And if it doesn't quite, then that's your option.
And
sorry,
that was a delay. You can go right into, like right now, tomorrow, whenever, you can go and read the wording of the law as it is. You can just look up current Washington State, Google Washington State immunization laws. I don't believe that they took away your right to have your doctor use a letter. On the 2011 exemption form, which is still available, and you could also try to use that one, that does not have the incriminating language on it. It just says, my doctor has told me about the risks and the benefits, and that's it. But on that form, it also stated your doctor can use a letter instead of this. The new form doesn't say anything, but I don't think there's anything in the wording of the law that took away your right to also just have your doctor use a letter. So there are other ways around it. You could ask me to show you the form afterwards, the older form. They may just use that. There are other options. I mean, it's good to push it, I think, if you can, but you know.
Okay, very excellent. This is a great discussion. Let's move on to our.
It's a great discussion that goes nowhere. The thing that bothers me the most is that over the past 5 years, number one, the best friend that I lost was an intellectual property lawyer named Nathan. And I had my leg up on a stool because my back hurts. And Nathan passed away after having an acute aneurysm. And I attribute it to him having transfected himself twice. And I'm upset about it because Nathan was the best man that I knew on earth, basically, is how to say it. And all of his friends agreed. Like, we all looked to Nathan as like the standard of, you know, if we did it like Nate, we'd be kicking ass. I don't know what to say, but I've had now several friends that are lawyers, and I know from them, I know from Nathan, that what made law so exciting to Nathan was that it was about winning arguments. It was about making arguments that were hard to defeat or had no holes. And that was the part about it that he liked. It was like a puzzle you had to solve. And if you assembled it correctly, it was stable and couldn't be knocked over. And so what I find so puzzling about a mom like, I don't know, a Columbia professor who claims that some part of the MMR hurt her son, she doesn't already have a very specific strategic legal strategy laid out to solve these problems, because that's what lawyers do. They build a solid argument based on, and instead she's sitting there quiet, letting James Lyons Weiler answer questions about legality and how to cross out phrases and things in forms and signature the change. If you don't see it yet, just understand that she doesn't have anything to say. She's more or less there to see what they say, so that she can report back to her little table with him and James, and they can decide how they can create a hamster wheel about that argument. Make sure that they never get any farther than that. Oh yeah, she's arguing about that. That's great. Let's keep her busy. Let's promote her. Maybe we should have her do an article for IPAC next month. And we can put her in touch with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., because by the time this is all over, those two people will have convinced Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to change his World Health or World Mercury Project to CHD. And they're going to all blame the story on Laura Bono. But I assure you, it had nothing to do with Laura Bono. It's these two and Meryl Nass.
Next.
This is actually a great segue. In my experience, something interfering with a lot of the legal and especially the scientific and political discussions are the social aspects, the language we use, the sociology around vaccines. And I'd be really interested to just go down the line and each of you speak briefly about what you would like to see change about the way we speak about vaccines across the board, across many different perspectives.
Think about the question that she just asked and how yours truly would answer it if he was on the stage right now. What would you change about how we speak about vaccines? That's a pretty badass question. You want to hear it again just to make sure you heard it right? Because it's a badass question.
This is actually a great segue. In my experience, something interfering with a lot of the legal and especially the scientific and political discussions are the social aspects, the language we use, the sociology around vaccines. And I'd be really interested to just go down the line and each of you speak briefly about what you would like to see change about the way we speak about vaccines across the board, across many different perspectives.
Well, I think the way the other side speaks is either directly or indirectly from a tactic of how to manipulate or control to achieve their end. And so in order to get to a place where we can truly have an objective, open discussion about it, we have to clear out whatever part is there with an agenda other than having that actual conversation. So I think we need to be exploring and looking more at what are the systems of control that are in place trying to prevent the conversation that all of us want to have. I'm not sure just continuing to assert our view and hoping at some point that somebody will finally say, okay, let's have a conversation. There are lots of, there are many different levels and types of people on this on both sides of it. So I'm kind of oversimplifying it here. There are good people who disagree with us, I would say because they have bad information, but there are also very deliberate mechanisms employed. When you don't have the truth on your side, you have to use something else to control the discussion. And so we are where we are because the discussion has been controlled. So we need to identify those mechanisms of control and address those in order to clear a space for there to be an open conversation. So that's what I'd like to see us as a community and a society, larger society, focusing on.
There was a meme
That's
that was
spectacular.
on Facebook, which really applies here. So there is one side yelling at the parent, "You are stupid, vaccines are safe." The other side is yelling at the parent, "You are stupid, vaccines are dangerous." So what I would like to see changed is that a parent is treated as an intelligent adult. And so neither side determines that the truth is on our side. We already did research, just accept on faith what we did or what we researched. We really need just to present information to parents and let them decide which risks they want to take or don't want to take and how they perceive diseases, and really just answer their questions to the extent possible. There. And it's really...
Remember what I'm saying, remember what Mark is saying, and remember what so many of these people are not saying. Intramuscular injection is an unjustifiably silly way. It's unjustifiable as a methodology in the application of medicine. Intramuscular injection is very simply ridiculous. And it's just absolutely remarkable that if you realize that intramuscular injection is maybe even worse than hitting kids on the head with a baseball bat repeatedly because you want their skull to get stronger or something like that. This is extraordinary, ladies and gentlemen, because if you believe what Brian Hooker believed in 2013, and that is that kids can reach a toxic tipping point because of this stupid vaccine schedule that probably doesn't save anybody anyway, that you would be fighting for it with a little more vigor. And when somebody asks you, how would you like people to talk about vaccines, you wouldn't have a 45-minute answer. You wouldn't have this canned answer about, let's let people make a choice about this stuff. Because, if parents believe that hitting their kids is good for them, then we should just let them do it. If doctors believe that hitting kids is good for them, then we should just let them do it. And if it's a hammer they want to use, or they want to use a small little toy baseball bat, or they want to use a collapsible metal baton, what difference does it make? It's up to them. Let's just give them all the information about, that stuff and let them decide. And so essentially, that's what Brian Hooker, who used to not use the word autism, just decided to do. I'm not going to take a stand on anything. I'm just going to let people decide. And maybe I'll get a book out of it, or maybe Robert F. Kennedy Jr. will get to the White House, and then we'll do something about it. I don't know what we're going to do, though, because I guess what we're going to do is just give them all the information and let them decide, because we don't want to yell at them the truth. We don't want to take the stance that we know the truth. That would be crazy. Because, homeopathy sometimes works, and vaccines can work, and there's stuff that it's out there.
It comes down to vaccine choice on either end.
Vaccine choice is absolutely bullshit.
That was a perfect answer. Yeah, I mean, part of changing the language around this conversation is that last slide that Tatiana showed, where it's not about putting vaccines in the middle, it's about putting the immune system, and maybe I'd like to put the child there too. And so if we all remember that we have the same goal, which is to have the healthiest, happiest, smartest children, we're trying to keep our kids safe from infectious disease and all.
Well, then why don't we look at the kids who've never had a vaccine and talk about how healthy and smart they are? You know, like Brandy Vaughn did. She's still alive right now, but not on stage with these super clowns.
Also keep their brains and their bodies intact. Then we can completely change the conversation and we can fix this.
So at the start of the vaccine epidemic book, it talks about the sort of pro versus anti and how that's totally unhelpful. It's such a much more complicated question. And for me, I focus on prior, free, and informed consent.
Informed consent does not exist if you tell people the mathematical risk. Informed consent only exists when you tell them the biological justification for what they're doing. And they don't have it. There is no biological justification for the intramuscular injection of a combination of substances to augment a healthy human. There just is not. You want to talk about free choice? You want to experiment with that shit? That's totally fine. Go ahead and do it. But to talk about it like it is medicine, to give it a term like vaccine to distinguish it from any other dumb idea is absurd. She knows it. That's why she's there. It's not a complicated issue. That's exactly her job, is to repeat that over and over. It's really complicated. It's a complicated environmental and a genetic. Oh.
The human right to choice. That's how I try to deal with the language.
The human right to choice? That's all she's got to say? Oh my gosh, it's vomitous. It's absolutely.
And you do it very well, by the way.
Have the same goal, which is to have the healthiest, happiest, smartest children.
And the healthiest, happiest, smartest children are the ones that aren't vaccinated. That's the truth. And yes, they do kind of say it in this book, kind of, but not really. And they're not selling this book anyway. And Brian Hooker isn't saying it anyway, so who gives a shit? It's not like anybody's proposing an IQ test.
We're trying to keep our kids safe from infectious disease and also keep their brains and their bodies intact.
Intact, but we use intramuscular injection as regular way of administering medicine?
Stop lying!
What does intact mean in your wild world?
Then we can completely change the conversation and we can fix this.
Listen to this global.
So at the start of the vaccine epidemic book, it talks about the sort of pro versus anti and how that's totally unhelpful. It's such a much more complicated question. And for me, I focus on prior, free, and informed consent and the human right to choice. That's how I try to deal with the language.
Oh my gosh. I don't think I've ever felt this much wrath in my whole life. What a fraud this woman is. What an absolute fraud this woman is, who's been on Bannon's War Room repeatedly for 5 years and been promoting Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as a flawless leader for 5 years and a CHD's, I don't know, president in leave or something like chairman on leave.
Stop lying!
Oh my gosh, this is one of the worst people in America. It's really awful.
And you do it very well, by the way.
There's another one. On stage at every CHD event I've ever attended, most of the time, every day, So multiple on stage in front of thousands of people that paid to go there to promote his IPAC that is doing this one now in 2017. This guy who wrote the Skyhorse book, The Environmental and Genetic Causes of Autism, in 2016. You know, the same publisher that published the Waging War on the Autistic Child by Andrew Wakefield in 2012, published Callous Disregard in 2001. That's at 10. No, 2010 with the data of my friend Paula Aitken's kid. And before that, published a book where there's an epilogue story in it where Robert F. Kennedy Jr. runs as an independent candidate and then joins another candidate and gets into the White House. And then the candidate that he got in the White House with gets shot. And that's a 2008 book by Skyhorse Publishing, the same publishing company that's put out Brian Hooker's book, that put out all of Robert Malone's books. You know, like The Lies My Government Told Me. You see, Children's Health Defense is right there with Robert Malone, right there. Skyhorse Publishing will probably put out Kevin McKernan's book in a year or two.
So I can refer you to jameslyonsweiler.com. I've written an article on this topic. It's time to change the course of the tone of and the course and dialogue of over vaccines and informed consent. And then I'd also like to see, respect is huge. I mean, that's part of it. I'd like to see Congress be told by the American public to fund earmark money for $1 billion to do neurodevelopment research. We don't need research on vaccines. That's for pharmaceutical companies to do. I'd like to see the pharmaceutical companies broken up like we did with Ma Bell and have competition between smaller and drive innovation with a free and open market. I'm hoping that this would be an opportunity for our government to do that with the MMR alleged fraud. The $1 billion that I'm speaking about, we have 7 research program initiatives.
Can you imagine now that there is a remote possibility that somebody like James Lyons Weiler will actually be around the NIH? Can you see what I'm saying? This is terrifying.
The Neurodevelopment Research Reform Initiative, and the very first program, the first priority program, is how do we treat these kids that are vaccine injured without saying they're vaccine injured? How do you handle all this neurodevelopment disorder in our society from a medical standpoint? What are the most optimal ways of treating them? How do you integrate that into education? And a major source of the inspiration for our hypothesis should come from the observational data from the population, the moms and the dads of the United States, testing cannabis oil and testing other methods and testing what happens if are there safe ways to get metals out of tissue and all of it. Let's do science. It's so obvious to me that we have a very sick subpopulation and they're not being completely underserved.
And of course, the thing that he's saying here is that there's a genetic vulnerability to these heavy metals. Some kids can handle it, some kids can't. Why don't we start studying detox? Why don't we start studying CBD oil? You know, cannabis, that thing that the Autism One conference in Chicago said was like a really good idea. You know, that thing that Kevin McKernan of the Human Genome Project has been sequencing. Probably to make medicines with plants. You know, like Brian Hooker did for 16 years before he said that I don't use the word autism because it's and this guy, how do we treat these vaccine injured kids without saying they're vaccine injured? Why don't we just call it autism?
The final thing I'd like to say is because artificial immunization is not going to go away. It's just not going to. So what I'd like to do is set up robust research to develop safety screens. And all of this presumes that we can do a natural, normal, objective.
Sorry, I'm cleaning my ears to make sure I heard what I just heard. I think there might be something in my ears. I think he said something about artificial, as even if that's a thing. Artificial vaccination is not going away. Did he say that? Did he say that? I think he said that. Let me just make sure. I had to clean my ear out.
Conversation.
That was really
with
something.
each other, which just points right back to respect point. What are the most optimal ways of treating them? How do you integrate that into education? And a major source of the inspiration for...
Just want to say that that's what Polly Tommy and her daughter did for the first 10 years of their anti-vax career. They just advocated for more awareness of autism and more ways for kids to get jobs as autism and for teachers to be more aware of autism. I shit you not. This has been going on for a long time, guys.
Hypothesis should come from the observational data from the population, the moms and the dads of the United States, testing cannabis oil and testing other methods and testing what happens if are there safe ways to get metals out of tissue and all of it. Let's do science. It's so obvious to me that we have a very sick subpopulation and they're not being completely underserved.
Stop lying!
The final thing I'd like to say is because artificial immunization is not going to go away. It's just not going to. So what I'd like to do is set up robust research to develop safety screens. And all of this presumes that we can do a natural, normal, objective conversation with each other, which just points right back to respect.
I don't know how to follow that, but
I don't know how to follow that either, because these two are two of the worst traitors in America. As far as I'm concerned, this is the heart of the fake anti-vax movement in America, because look how long they've been busy. Look how long they have not been able to progress to understanding intramuscular injection as a methodology as wholly inappropriate given our biology. This lady said, I want to talk about the immune system. Well, you want to understand it? You want to talk about an intact kid, but you're going to give medicine with a needle? It's remarkable, ladies and gentlemen, and it is remarkable because remember, the reason why we have a fake anti-vax movement in America is because this idea is so simple. Intramuscular injection is actually dumb. It makes no sense in the context of our biology, the way that our immune system is organized, the way that our microbiome is organized, and likely the way that our symbiosis with our microbiome expresses itself is the immune system. And so augmenting that system willy-nilly to pretend that we're saving people can only be a malevolent mythology put in place by people like Hillary Kaprowski and probably even Joshua Lederberg, in the sense of Joshua Lederberg understood that he lived in Rome and that certain things were going to happen. Apparently, James Lyons Weiler also understands that he's in Rome, because artificial vaccination is never going to go away because Rome wants it. And once you start to see it that way, once you rewatch Ben-Hur and you hear Pontius Pilate say those words to Ben-Hur, and a man should know where he is, and right now the world is Rome, that's what you see here. People have been given the opportunity to serve Rome, and they're serving Rome. This one from Columbia University, not that dissimilar from Jeffrey Sachs from Columbia University, serving Rome. Not America, and certainly not America's grandchildren. And if you can't see James Lyons Weiler for the traitor that he is right now, given the context, given the 7 years of context, almost 9 years of context that we have between this time and where we are now in 2025.
I mean, it would kind of go along with what Tatiana and Jennifer said, and I just really wish there was less disdain from both sides of the issue. It seems like social media has just ramped up this war of hatred, and people saying, I hope your kids die then, or, you know, even coming from our side with, you know, accusing someone of making the wrong comment that they're a troll, and it can get so bad so quickly in online conversation. And I just wish that publicly there would be more discussion of really how vaccines work and some of the limitations, like how it's sort of assumed that if you're vaccinated, you can't get sick and you can't spread disease. You're good. And that's just not necessarily.
She almost got there, right? She's like, I wish people would explain how vaccines work and how they're not perfect, and, you know, try to be. She's thinking in the right direction, but she hasn't done the requisite work. And I'm not blaming her, because I hadn't done it until now either. But she hasn't done the requisite work so that she could teach it as easily as I can teach it. And since somebody in the chat asked me to do it, I'm going to do it again. Oh, I couldn't find my pen because I had it in its case. I think I can just go whoop like that. No? Wait, what? It's not on? Okay, I don't have my camera on, but I can turn that on real quick. So I'm gonna try and answer the question that Dragon Knight put in there. Would love a stream on how intramuscular vax is inappropriate biologically speaking. I've got a pretty good cartoon way of teaching you, and then you can fill in the details by just Googling the stuff that I talk about and figuring out that I'm probably right. So we can go over here, I think, now. I'm going to draw a rudimentary representation of your biology and specifically what you are as a pattern integrity. Remember, we are starting with the pretense that life is a pattern integrity with a trajectory across time, okay? And so I can't really draw a good picture of you as a human if I draw you with legs and arms and a head, because those legs and arms and head have changed a lot over your lifetime. But if I simplify your body structure to two holes, because you have a hole right here and you got a hole back there, then I can draw a pretty simplified body. And I draw it kind of like what an ion channel would look like. And I draw it in cross-section like this. And I usually have, you know, like some kind of, I can't really draw it perfect because I'm not an illustrator. But you can imagine you can draw it like this, for example. You wouldn't be able to see both sides of it necessarily, but in this 3D drawing, you can see it in both sides. And so there's a hole with a side hole, and then basically this. And so the way that I would draw you as a pattern integrity is that you have an inside and an outside, but you have to remember that the outside includes the contents of this hole. So in a sense that you're like a tube. And so if you think of yourself as a tube and you understand that actually there are several gates in here, right? There are gates. And at every gate, there's a fairly good, everything in here is coated in mucus. And what ends up happening in the course of your lifetime is that food is coming in this end and waste is coming out this end. And also air comes in this way, but it also comes out this way, right? And so that's a good basis, right? Here's your lungs. This would be your esophagus and your trachea and then your intestine. So you can get fancy about this tube, but just understand this is as simple as I can make it. And there are a few sphincters that can kind of keep this compartmentalized, and it's not that dissimilar to how the gut of a honeybee is organized. And just like the gut of a honeybee, you also have several zones in your tube, and in those tubes there are different complements of bacteria. Now, interestingly, in addition to those different complements of bacteria, Every cell in your body is essentially a symbiotic machine, because inside of each cell is a bacterial symbiont called the mitochondria, and many of them. They have their own DNA, they divide on their own, etc. We don't understand a lot about mitochondria, at least they don't tell us a lot about mitochondria, but they are considered endosymbionts in my new biology and the biology of people like Lynn Margulis, and also the biology of people like Joshua Lederberg. And so it is my contention, and it is kind of a synthesis of other people's ideas, and it wouldn't surprise me if many people had already thought of this, but it is my contention that the individual pattern integrity that is you has a border like this. This is the whole pattern integrity, all the way around, and all the bacteria that are in here, all the bacteria that are on your skin, all the bacteria that are in the lining of your lungs, and all the mitochondria in your body, of course, are all one individual. And this is a symbiotic relationship, that this pattern integrity, at the heart of it, is a symbiotic relationship. It doesn't exist without it. And what you will find with regard to plants and animals and insects is that they all share that in common. Even trees have an intimate interaction with soil bacteria at their roots. And without that interaction, trees would not be trees. Without the soil, the compost heap that we carry around in our gut, we would not exist. It is an absolutely essential part of our biology. And it is not just one bacteria. It is not just, there to clean up the waste. It is a symphony that allows us to seamlessly extract useful things from our food, useful things from the bacterial processes that occur here. And what's interesting, most interesting, is that the only sure thing in virology is bacteriophages. The genetic signal equivalent to viruses in bacteria are called bacteriophages. So we have bacteria of different kinds in our guts, and we can call this 1 and 2 and 3. And those bacteria are signaling, they are influencing one another using phages. And those phages, coincidentally, are free to pass the gut barrier. They're free to pass the blood-brain barrier. They're free to go wherever the hell they want to. And so it is very likely, in my humble opinion, that the immune system is primarily here to regulate what phages and what phage communication is allowed and what phage communication is not part of the symbiosis, so that the preferred bacterial symbionts are given optimal conditions in our gut. That's what our immune system probably does. And in that interaction with the gut microbiome, we essentially prevent disease by and keep ourselves healthy and keep our digestion efficient by selecting with our immune system to benefit or to let's say bias the phage communication to the bacteria that we want there, that our body has selected, that our breast milk has taught us and given us, because bacteria from the gut go through breast milk, believe it or not. And so one of the ways that your microbiome should have been seeded was through the breast milk of your mother. And so now if you see the immune system as selecting for and biasing this whole system so that you have a symbiotic relationship with the bacteria at the barrier of your skin, you have a symbiotic relationship with the bacteria that line the mucosal layer of your airways and of your gut, and you have this symbiotic relationship which is maintained by the immune system's interaction with them and their phages. So if this is the background on which they claim to be able to pull up an RNA that is attributable to a coronavirus is absurd, because the background signal here of bacteriophages from outside and within the individual are so many orders of magnitude above what they claim are, at one time, Stephen Hatfield in 2020 said that you needed 50 virins in order to pass the infection from one person to another. This is just absurd. And we have uncovered the biological basis for this system in our understanding of and tracing the roots of shotgun sequencing, because the people that invented shotgun sequencing are not actually the Human Genome Project at all. It's not at all. It was actually somebody working on corals and bacteriophages. And so then if I culminate this explanation, we have an immune system that is organized from the inside out, and inside out would also be pointing into the gut like this, right? And that orientation of the immune system is oriented inside out, but allows the free passage of phages. And so in my hypothesis, one of the most important roles of the immune system would be to make sure that if there is phages that are in circulation that are from bacteria that we do not want, that are foreign to our symbiosis, that our immune system better damn well be aware of it. And I think that's where, if you say that you're going to inject something here and you're going to augment this system when you don't even understand its primary purpose, you don't even understand the primary players in the symphony and what you're purporting to augment by producing antibodies to it. When antibodies' primary function may be to mop up bacterial toxins associated with bacteria that are not part of our symbiosis. The symbiosis being the pattern integrity. You are a pattern integrity with a trajectory across time, and you cannot augment this beautiful symphony by squirting shit here. That's my best way of saying that intramuscular injection is not a biologically sound way of administering medicine. Let's go back to the video and fix that. Hope that helped.
The case for everyone. People respond differently, and yeah.
So does everyone know what the Cutter incident was?
Yes.
Oh.
Oh, good. Talk about it.
So in 1954, Cutter Labs made a polio vaccine that was supposed to be an inactivated vaccine, and it wasn't adequately inactivated, and so
the problem with this argument is that means that adequately inactivated vaccines are fine, and that's bullshit.
When they were doing the vaccine trials, I mean, they weren't trials, but they were rolling it out, and they rolled it out, I know for sure in Idaho, because that's where I lived, and I got that vaccine, and I'm a Cutter kid. And I'm fine, but when I get really tired, I still can feel the effects of having received that vaccine.
Wow, that is a testimony, boy. She got the Cutter vaccine and she's got chronic fatigue from it. Damn.
In terms of just being nervous, nerve jumpy. I don't do well when I'm exhausted. And my mom told me that it was the scariest part of her motherhood. But nevertheless, I grew up and went to nursing school and had first career as an intensive care nurse. And then I met some friends from Africa who were here as AIDS scholars. And I met them because I love to dance, and they told me that I should go into epidemiology. And I had to handwrite my application because I was computer illiterate, but for whatever reason, the University of Washington let me in. And I graduated in epidemiology, and totally by fluke, they needed somebody at the local health department in the middle of the Jack-in-the-Box outbreak. And that wasn't what I was gonna do with epidemiology, because I'm an anthro undergrad. And I was gonna do
Jack in the Box was bacteria, by the way.
sociocultural epidemiology studies. But I fell in love with infectious disease. And
who wouldn't? You know, I mean.
And I've been doing it ever since. And the immunization coordinator at the health department where I was working was also doing the disease surveillance. And so I started doing that part of her job. So what I've done over the last almost 25 years is it's my job to know about the diseases for which a vaccine has been developed. It's my job to know how the disease presents. And so I'm a surveillance epi for vaccine preventable diseases. And every phone call I get is an adventure. I want to talk to whoever is on the phone. I want to answer their questions. I want to make sure they have the resources that's needed. And I want all of you to realize that there are thousands of people like me across the country who really want to be a good public servant and who really want people to have whatever they need, whatever's causing their discomfort about.
She said that she fell in love with infectious disease and she got a clapping ovation with laughter. This lady is not sophisticated enough to understand that she's part of the machine. This is what I would call an unwitting participant. I don't know why they accepted me. They accepted you because they knew you weren't sophisticated enough to see through the bullshit, that you were just smart enough to learn what they told you, and that you would be happy to go around and do what you're doing right now. Especially if you have somebody like James Lyons Weiler and Mary Holland whispering into your ear and sending you phone calls and text messages.
The situation they're in, we want those resources to get out there. And what I would really love is if people could just do a check when you're saying our side and their side. And what does that even mean?
What does that even mean, indeed? That's the question that I have when I see the frickin' shit that's going on right now. It really pisses me off, okay? Because this is not right. It's not right. It is absolutely, positively not right. It is absolutely, positively not right that dollars went to CHD and CHD made banners that says rise and resist, people over profits, truth over lies. It doesn't even make sense. What is the message? At some point in time, either this is a big deal or it's just, who's better, LeBron James or Michael Jordan. Either it's an argument without consequence and it doesn't really matter what your opinion is, or you freaking know the answer. Do you see this? There is no other way to see it. We are in a trap. It is a hamster wheel for your mind, and it is maintained by people like her, but even worse, by coordinated liars like Mary Holland and Meryl Nass and James Lyons Weiler and Brian Hooker and all these other people who damn well knew better. There is no other explanation for the audio that I have of Brian Hooker saying he doesn't use the word autism, other than they convinced him to use the word autism to get Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in the White House, and he went along with it. Because it wasn't to save kids from suffering the damage that his kid had. It wasn't to save parents from suffering the horrible trials that he's gone through as a father. That apparently is fine because Polly cured her kid, and Jenny McCarthy cured her kid.
Great, thank you very much.
And Andrew Wakefield is a hero.
I'm coming your way. We've got a question here.
Hi. First, I want to say the two answers about the homeopathic nosodes. I'm a naturopathic physician, and when you asked the question, I kind of braced myself, and your answers were awesome and made my day. Thank you so much. But today I heard a lot of kind of vilifying generalizations about doctors and how we approach vaccines and how we approach talking to our patients about it. And I totally understand those generalizations because that's what a lot of people experience when they go to their pediatricians. I was wondering if you knew, or honestly anybody here, of a way that physicians who are more like-minded to what we're talking about here, a way that we can become more visible. Is there an organization we can join that has our name somewhere? It's a little bit, I feel, dangerous to kind of blatantly advertise that you're okay with not vaccinating because you'll get trolled, somebody might report you. But if there's any other way.
Informed consent.
Well, I went to that website right away, and it says that if you register and join, your name's not going to be shared with anybody. So,
Well, if you indicate your intention to be shared, you can become advisor, and then your name will appear there.
Okay.
If you don't want to be anonymous.
Well, perfect. Thank you.
There's another way to do that. There are, I think, 3 different sites that host online lists of vaccine-friendly doctors.
Can you add me to a list of people that somebody like Elon Musk could use to tailor my social media so that I never realize that I'm being played? That's essentially what she asked for. And that's essentially what we do when we join CHD's website, or we support them even, or we join ICANN or say, yes, put me on the emailing list. Essentially, you've just put yourself on a list of people that needs to be controlled on social media. And social media allows that because you know what you know. Do you know what you know when you scroll on your phone? You know what you see. That's it. And every single person on earth sees something different on their phone social media. No 2 feeds are the same, and they can be tailored by programming. It's not an algorithm. Virality on the internet is a lie. It's a mythology. It's the same mythology. Things can go viral, and so can RNA.
Stop lying!
So make sure that you and everyone you know who falls in that category. So a vaccine-friendly doctor is someone who maybe gives vaccines, but is friendly to families who want to individualize or customize the schedule. So one is
individualize or customize the schedule. Instead of hitting them 3 times in one day, maybe you can hit them on both sides of the head, and then we'll come back in a couple weeks and we'll hit them with the 3rd one. Of course, that's that guy, Paul Thomas. That was his claim to fame for these last 10 years, that he has a alternative schedule with a few less shots, and they're a little later. You know, when their skull is harder, so the bat doesn't hurt so much.
Dr. Bob Sears is the other, is Naturally Nicole's. And then the 3rd one is, I think, that Dr.
You know, in reality, it's not a totally terrible argument. If you've got to inject shit, you should inject it later. Of course that's true. I would make that argument in spades. Your life is a pattern integrity with a trajectory across time, and you can screw up that trajectory much worse the earlier you bump it. That's for sure. I totally agree. It would be best if we could get rid of all the injections until they're 4, and then probably a lot of the worst stuff would go away. But we would still kill people, and we would still neurologically injure people, and the worst case scenario for sure. Especially if we decided that they still needed 72 shots, we were just going to start them at year 4. So without a doubt, this is a limited spectrum of debate. If you say that, well, we'll just give it to the pattern integrity later. Yes, that is true. Then if the cruise ship was going from New York to Spain and you changed the course of the ship really early, you could get it to go all the way to South Africa. But if you waited too long, the only thing you could really do was change whether it went into the Mediterranean or it went north of Spain. That's it. And you can see that, right? And so sure, that's an argument that makes biological sense, but it is an argument that nevertheless assumes that intramuscular injection is a good idea. We should just apply it later. But this cartoon doesn't change for your entire frickin' life. So it doesn't matter if you're 80 years old or 8 days old, this cartoon still means that injecting at the star is a biologically ridiculous idea. Damn, I'm kicking some butt today.
Paul Thomas is also hosting a site.
There he was. You heard the name, Paul Thomas.
I just want to say thank you, first of all. I've resonated with many things that you guys have said, especially you, a fellow nurse. I'm also a nurse, and I've seen both sides. I've also had a vaccine reaction myself, and luckily it's documented, and it gets me an exemption from getting the flu vaccine every single year in my job, which I get a form to sign that has statements that say, you're making your patients susceptible, other people susceptible, and I always end up saying I'm signing this under duress.
Before the pandemic happened, so that they would know exactly how and exactly what the arguments are and be practiced with it and understand how to do it and know how to and make sure that people never fell out of the hamster wheel. That the merry-go-round or the Ferris wheel never stopped. Every time they came down to the bottom, okay, I think we're going to get off now. Nope, we're going back up again. That's how this works. And understand that they had to be doing this before the pandemic because these people were crucial to making sure the conservative right in America, once they really understood that the pandemic was bullshit, would be corralled into a limited spectrum of debate that would still be politically useful and controllable. And Elon Musk bought X, and that whole theater happened to make sure that people thought the truth was being given away on X so that for sure they could be controlled by it. We were assimilated, ladies and gentlemen. That's what happened. We got assimilated.
Pertussis, and I'm sorry I was in and out earlier. I had my baby here, but my husband took him home. I don't know if I missed it. I remember reading that the pertussis vaccine is causing people who've been vaccinated to be more susceptible to getting pertussis. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with that study or can speak to that.
Yeah. So the study that came out of CDC, they were looking at 2 different strains of pertussis and how they're distributed between patients.
Why do they have this Ukrainian lady? Because she's the Kevin McKernan auditioning for the role, or maybe she decided not to do it for the pandemic. I don't know. I don't know where she went. But she is the stupid, complicated version of the dumb, simple opposite with James Lyons Weiler. This is remarkable, and I've watched a couple other hours of her, and I've become very, very convinced that this Rockefeller, Harvard, Stanford scientist, doctor, is a plant. She makes it more complicated than it is, and it is very, very simple. That's why I can draw a diagram like this, and nobody can argue with it. Even Joshua Lederberg wouldn't argue with that. He would love that explanation for my boundaries of the individual. And in fact, the idea of drawing the boundaries around the microbiome and including that as part of ourselves was Joshua Lederberg's idea. Get some.
So, pertussis cases that have been vaccinated versus not. And the strain, which is pertactin negative, that's what it is called now, seems to be affecting.
I'm going to cut it right here. I think it's really important to remind you again, yesterday I showed you a video from October 10th, 2020 of that same character that was just on stage, James Lyons Weiler, staging a speech, a pro-Trump speech in October 10th, 2020, at the heart of when the murder really was going to pick up. We just had some local murder in New York earlier in 2020, and now we were going to spread it all around the United States for the first winter. And James Lyons Weiler gave this speech.
Our third expert that traveled from not New York or Michigan, but right here from the Pittsburgh area here in Pennsylvania. And
this guy's been on stage at every CHD event I've ever been at, and he plugs his iPack, and I believe with absolute certainty that he is a 100% meddler, liar, traitor to our children. One of the worst.
I want to thank the media for being here and thank everyone online for sharing this across all social platforms. I'm an objective research scientist, and I have two main points that I want to drive home. The first one is the number 21%. I want you to remember that number and write it down. It's a very, very important number to you if you're an American citizen. The second thing that, and I'll get to that in a minute, the second thing that I want to say is I'm not here in support of any particular bill. I run a not-for-profit, and I can't say yay or nay on my opinion. And what my personal opinion is muted, and I don't mind that. But I can condemn the politicization of your health, the politicization and the commoditization of the American citizens' health. Pennsylvania citizens' health is not a commodity. It is neither a monetary commodity, nor is it a political commodity. And shame on you if you have changed your position or held on to a position in the light of evidence from data, from studies that tell you that your position is wrong simply because you disagree with President Trump.
I don't even know what he said there. I don't even know what that means. Ignoring papers just because you disagree with Donald Trump. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to make a bold statement here, but if you missed it, this guy was in Pittsburgh. And I'm going to go so far as to say in October of 2020 was when I was told to not come in anymore. Turn in your badge and keys, you're fired. This guy moved from Pittsburgh to Michigan because they knew that I was trying to contact him. And they knew that if I ever got in touch with this guy, I would know exactly how much of a bullshitter he was within an hour of spending time with him. And since he was in Pittsburgh, I could have gone over to his frickin' house. And by the time he replied to me, to my emails, that I was telling him that I worked at the same University of Pittsburgh as you, dude, and I got fired, dude, he had moved to Michigan. And he wanted me to teach a course in his IPAC University. I know it sucks. It really sucks to be me because I've seen a UFO, and I have to keep telling everybody that I've seen the UFO, and I'm not happy about it. I don't like to have to say that this guy is actually as bad as he is, but knowing that he's as bad as he is makes me feel obligated to the rest of my fellow citizens in America to tell them. The same way I feel about Mary Holland, the same way I feel about the Truman Show victim, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the same way I feel about the poser, Jay Bhattacharya, who tried to pretend to be my friend for 3 years and specifically told me to stop talking about Robert Malone because he was about to be nominated for NIH director and I should, stop talking about people and just talk about biology. These people are part of something that is not for my children or yours. It is about the controlled demolition of America. And maybe the pandemic was the start of the lighting of the fuse, like it's now on and all of these people know it and they all think that they're on the ark. They all think they got an all-access laminate, and that's why they're doing this. Otherwise, you can't explain this behavior. His language won't get any better. He's not going to be more succinct in his message.
Shame on you. You're hurting people. You're hurting society. You're destroying businesses. Shame on you. Now that I got that out, I can talk about some science. Okay. Historically, coronaviruses, vaccines for coronaviruses have had a terrible safety record. There is a condition known as disease enhancement due to pathogenic priming. And this was discovered in vaccinated animals.
So he's renaming something that is called antibody-dependent enhancement, and those are actually papers that exist. So here, already you can see that he's being a jackass because
after being vaccinated, and then when they acquired it,
this pathogenic priming is a term that only he
more
uses.
More animals got serious infections.
Understand how bad that is.
Animals died. In my peer-reviewed research paid for the citizens of the United States of America through donations to IPAC, prior to the development of any COVID vaccines, I found that all but one of the proteins in the SARS-CoV-2 virus have what we call unsafe epitopes, right? Which are parts of proteins that are capable of causing immune conditions, autoimmune conditions.
This is exactly on narrative. Remember that there is a company called Epivax that Robert Malone used to work for that looked very specifically for special epitopes that could activate the immune system and guarantee a good response. And so he's telling the flip side of that story, which that we can look at proteins and remove the dangerous epitopes that might have some kind of added danger to people, and we could make a safe vaccine. And so again, what he's slipping in here is this assumption that we need vaccines, that vaccines can work. It's just that sometimes they don't. And so if we knew everybody's genetic background and we knew better, which people are susceptible to heavy metals, then the people that are fine with heavy metals can still get those vaccines, and we can make other vaccines for other people. This man is absolutely positively a traitor to my children.
And immune responses against proteins in our own body. This is peer-reviewed research, and I'll be happy to provide the press with a reference after this. About a third of the proteins that might be targeted by autoimmune conditions by SARS-CoV-2 viral proteins, either through infection or injection.
His pronunciation of COV and COVID is an admission that he worked with Robert Malone to get this story. I guarantee you Robert Malone is another one of the people that is definitely a traitor to my children.
Target the immune system. But from the start, it looks like this virus has evolved the ability to attack our immune system as part of its disease-causing capacity. This pathogenic priming, I predicted in my study which parts of the human body would likely be most affected by pathogenic priming.
Just this random guy in Pittsburgh, he predicted everything. He knew everything. He knew of the fear and cleavage site. He knew of all of it. He was even on Chinese news. Come on. This guy, the environmental and genetic causes of autism guy. This guy, the guy who says that vaccine preventable diseases are spreading asymptomatically among the people that are vaccinated. This guy who says that we're going to be stuck with artificial vaccination forever. I guess we're going to have to find an alternative organic vaccination then to help out. And then we'll just educate everybody and hope everybody chooses organic, right?
Stop lying!
And now studies by medical physicians, by medical teams around the world are confirming my predictions. This is not simply a respiratory virus with respiratory symptoms. This affects many.
He is claiming to be one of the smartest and most insightful biologists on Earth. Make no mistake about it.
Tissues across the body, and there's some grave concern if you're going to get infected.
Also, make no mistake about the fact that in July of 2020, I already said that they were misconstruing a background as spread in order to take advantage of the collapsing dollar. And then I was still employed by the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine, and they still didn't know what the hell to do about me.
But where's the grave concern if you're going to be injected with these same proteins? Not a single, to my knowledge, not a single vaccine manufacturer took heed of my warning to remove those unsafe epitopes from the vaccines before they formulated their vaccines.
Well, I mean, they're all reading his blog, so I guess they're just ignoring his advice.
In spite of being emailed my study with a plea to please consider taking out those unsafe epitopes. Your body has 500,000 peptides throughout your life. The coronavirus has something like 28 proteins. What's the probability that there's going to be many proteins that match at small segments of immunogenic epitopes?
Don't forget that those 27 proteins, many of them have multiple functions, according to virologists like Robert Malone and David Baltimore.
It's very high. We now have results from front-runner vaccines from these hybrid trials where they skipped over the animals trials. FDA, in it absolutely ignoring safety margin, in a stunning decision, decided to allow Moderna and other vaccine manufacturers to skip the most.
This is all fake, ladies and gentlemen. The lady that was on screen with them in 2017, this is her name. You can search for that. You can see where she did her thing. She has a book called The Vaccine Illusion that is still available on Amazon. And did I set this up right? Maybe I did. Did I set this up right? No, I didn't. So let me go back. I wanted that to fly away. And get out of the way. So let me just get it smaller. But if you look at what Amazon dishes up, you can only get it on Kindle. And so you got to listen to that. Otherwise, you can't get it. And then look what they give you for books afterward. Paul Thomas, Suzanne Humphreys, the Turtles All the Way Down book, which was essentially promoted by Steve Kirsch. Jack Stockwell, I don't know. Neil Miller, I don't know. Mark Bailey, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and then here's another Bailey book. The foreword is by Sam Bailey. Can You Catch a Cold? So Amazon doesn't have any problem with any of these books. These aren't scary. This is the truth, apparently. It's just free. Well, not free. You can buy them. Some of them are 65% off. Mark Bailey's book is 65% off. It's only $7 now. What a great, that's awesome. Wow, that's just great. Good for him. I think that's awesome. Resuming slideshow. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, intramuscular injection is dumb, and if you need to say it in a little more gentlemanly way, you can say intramuscular injection is not a biologically justifiable way to administer medicine to a healthy person. And you can learn the biology of ingestion versus injection and compare all of the ways that we could avoid toxins that we ingest versus all the ways we can't avoid toxins when we are injecting them. And you'll understand what I was trying to say with this figure over here, and I'll teach this until I'm blue in the face. It's not the perfect diagram yet, so I'm still working on what to do.
I was born in 1998, and virtually every vaccine that he received that could have thimerosal is the mercury-containing organic preservative that they used in vaccines and still use in some instances, but he had a very high.
So keep in mind that this could already be Brian on a script, because he says it's mercury and there was a lot of mercury, and so he seems to simplify it to the fact that if there wasn't so much mercury and he hadn't taken so many shots, that he might not have reached a toxic tipping point and then gone into neurological damage. And so it may be that right now we're still trying to figure out how to deal with this problem, how to talk about it. And Brian Hooker is one of those people who's trying to figure out how to talk about it. And one of the ways that he deals with it right now in 2013 is that he doesn't use the word autism. And for that, I admire him.
A dose of thimerosal in his infant vaccines, and then he basically reached a toxic tipping point at about 15 months. And regressed into a condition that we will not call autism. I don't like the word autism. He was vaccine damaged. He was neurologically damaged.
And so just like every pharmaceutical company and every global health project would love the Human Genome Project, fits right into the Human Genome Project, and it's very easy for you to conceive that these people would work together to enslave the world. You know, the United Nations, the WHO, the Aspen Institute, any of these companies would be happy to contribute to the enslavement of all of mankind. All the people that own social media, of course, have global reach. And so they have global influence that they can sell around the world, that we can change history, we can change people's opinion. We're worth millions of votes. They know that. This is a global power. Not that dissimilar to the noosphere that was invented or imagined by Teilhard de Chardin. And Teilhard de Chardin is this guy who talked a long time about how the Catholic Church might be the group that would take control of the evolution of the species, essentially by being one global consciousness. And so what we're dealing with here is a very scary Truman Show where people behind the scenes have taken advantage of other people's desires or dreams to save America and used them and played them like a fiddle. And I think that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. probably at one time was a good guy and thought he was fighting for good things and really believed in the legacy of his father. And a lot of liars have taken advantage of that belief. And after 20 years of consistent lying, we are where we are, where Casey Means is the Surgeon General, where Vinay Prasad is going to be the head of biologics, where a clown like Marty McCarty, a surgeon, is the head of the FDA, where a person who deferred to me repeatedly in our interview a couple years ago as the biologist, an economist, is the head of NIH. It's all by design, ladies and gentlemen. They took a background and they misconstrued it as spread, told us an elaborate mythology, and this is for all the marbles. It's for the grandchildren of Earth. That's why there's a fake vaccine movement in America. You can figure it out by thinking about this background as irreducible, and so using PCR on that background with no controls. I mean, come on, that's a joke. It's a non-specific PCR test, and as long as you believe that it's finding something, and as long as all these people agree that it is, then the illusion is complete. And everybody agrees. From Mike Eden to Sasha Latipova to Kevin McKernan, all the way to Kevin McCairn, everybody agrees that PCR works to find this novel virus, and it's been trackable for 5 years.
Stop lying!
RNA cannot pandemic, ladies and gentlemen, and if you use their test to find their ghosts, you're not making their ghosts real, nor does that make you a hero or a ghostbuster. They use placebos to make it safe because intramuscular injection is dumb. Thanks for being here, ladies and gentlemen. I love you very much. I'll see you again soon.
Whoa, stop the fuck out.
I'm sorry, I just love that clip. The way that guy fires that engine up at the end with one last rev. Oh my gosh, it's amazing.